When I was 13, it's me at 13, I was told by my teachers that I had no academic future. From a traditional and privileged background, attending a prestigious and fee-paying school in Liverpool, I was performing poorly and was generally uninterested in academia. I was more interested in boys and makeup. But that was okay, as my parents were sure that, like my mother and grandmother before me, my education was simply a way of passing time until I married a suitable man who would then take care of me. Painfully shy, lacking in confidence and ambition, when it came to choose my O-level topics, I'd done so badly in the previous exams, I was told I wasn't intelligent enough to study the subjects of my choice, such as physics. I would be lucky to pass maths and should focus on more practical subjects such as cookery and needlework, as these would be most useful for me in the future. I know. Yet despite this, through a twist of fate, I got that physics O-level and was thankfully saved from cookery and needlework. Yes. But as an educator myself, I often wonder about this. How come I got labelled as a poor student and responded accordingly? And what enabled me to change? There's research about this. It turns out it's not just me. You may have heard of the Pygmalion effect, coined by the psychologist Robert Rosenthal, named after George Bernard Shaw's play, which features the flower girl, Eliza Doolittle. Rosenthal and his team administered a test of general ability, or a TOGA or IQ test, to all of the students in a Californian elementary school. Regardless of the results, they randomly picked 20% of the students and told the teachers that they could expect these students to be academic bloomers. At the end of the year, all of the students were retested, and the 20% who were labelled academic bloomers showed a significantly greater increase in their results than the other children. More recent research has shown that teachers interact with high expectancy students, those they expect to do well, much differently to low expectancy students, those that for some reason they think will perform poorly. They give high expectancy students more compliments and praise, in contrast, criticising low expectancy students for failure. They probe for answers and draw out know-how far more in high expectancy students, and are more likely to give low expectancy students less time to answer questions and often tell them the answers. High expectancy students are generally given more feedback and attention, whilst low expectancy students are often overlooked, placed further away from the teacher at the back of the room, and receive less feedback and eye contact. When a high expectancy student performs badly in an assignment, the teacher treats it as a one-off, assumes they'll perform well in the next assignment and treats them as such, as we can see here. If a low expectancy student performs well, the teacher puts this down to luck, overlooking what we would call a counter or exception, and treats them as if they will continue to perform poorly. We can see that the first column is familiar to us, using the tools and approach of solutions focus. The second column is what we would call problem focused. So, we get what we expect. In addition to how we're treated, context we know plays a significant role. Infamously, in 1971, Philip Zimbardo created an experiment that looked at the role of becoming a prisoner or prison guard. He set up a mock prison in the basement of Stanford University's psychology department, and then selected 24 undergraduate students to play the role of both prisoner and guard. Those selected had no criminal background, psychological issues, or major medical conditions. The 24 volunteers were then randomly assigned to either the prison group or the guard group. The experiment was scheduled to last for 14 days. However, it had to be stopped after just 6 days. While the prisoners and guards were allowed to interact in any way they wanted, the interactions were generally hostile and even dehumanizing. The guards were aggressive and abusive towards the prisoners, while the prisoners became passive and depressed. Even the researchers themselves began to lose sight of the reality of the situation. Zimbardo, who acted as the prison warden, overlooked the abusive behavior of the guards until another researcher raised concerns. We've seen plenty of pictures like this in the press recently. It doesn't matter who you think you are. When you're put in a given context with strong expectations, you'll start behaving in a stereotypical way. Guards or prisoners, therapists or clients, business class or economy. We know what to do without being told. So context can play a powerful part in how we interact and behave. Yet we are not actual prisoners of our past. We can change contexts, shift and reframe them, and be aware of their power and mitigate this in all sorts of creative ways. And here are a couple of cases from our work which demonstrate this. We were training employment advisors, people responsible for helping the unemployed get back to work. And I was sitting in on a session with a new advisor, and he was interviewing Julie. Julie was over 65, and I'd been told that not only was she rather old for the employment market, she was also stubborn, uncooperative, and that even when the advisors managed to get her an interview, which wasn't very often, she performed poorly, providing short and uninformative answers. All of this supported their view that she was unsuitable and unlikely to be employed in the near future. For the first 5 minutes, I listened to the advisor ask, "How many jobs have you applied for since last time? How can you improve your CV? Do you really want to work?" Yeah. Julie was getting more and more agitated. Finally, she threw her hands up in the air and said, "I've had enough. I've answered all of these questions before. I just don't know what to do next." The advisor, at a loss, asked me to continue. So I stepped in, thinking about what Julie wanted and what I'd heard. I asked, "So, if we could have a conversation that would get you closer to getting more interviews, would that be useful?" "Yes, that would be helpful, as I've only had 2 interviews in 6 months. Although they don't like me in interviews, they say I've got no hobbies." Oop. I then asked a classic Steve DeShazer, which I've just previewed for you. "So, tell me, Julie, what do you do with your days?" "Nothing." "What'd you say?" "Well, I could only work with what was there." And I asked, "So what does nothing consist of?" Thank you. Hey, thank you. I watch TV. What do you watch? The Right Stuff. It's a current affairs show in the UK. "So you like current affairs?" "Yes." "What are they talking about at the moment?" "The Labour leadership debate." She told me all about her preferred candidate. "What else interests you then?" "Oh, I often go to the library and research people in the press." She'd be looking into Obama and Mandela. "When have you had a slightly better day than usual?" "Oh, I took myself on a bus to Cambridge and visited all of the museums." We carried on talking about what nothing consisted of. The advisor was now taking copious notes about Julie's interests and skills. When we finished, Julie thanked me for listening and went off with him to rewrite her CV. Rather than stubborn and unemployable, the advisors now started talking about Julie's experience, her interest in current affair, and her abilities as a researcher. Within a week, they'd arranged 2 interviews for her. A few years ago, we introduced solutions-focused working into Reading Borough Council in the UK. Rather than training everybody in the local authority, we developed SF champions, and it was their role to share the approach with others and embed it throughout the council. This was so successful that one of our champions, Wendy, asked us to develop a group of community champions. These were people who lived in deprived areas of the borough, themselves had little education, many were unemployed, and some had been referred to social services. What they had in common was that they'd all volunteered to be part of the programme and wanted to make a difference in the community that they lived. Having introduced them to SF tools and principles, each champion took on a project. This included using solutions focus on a project in the community. It ranged from street parties to road safety. Let's meet Charlotte, one of our champions. She'd been very quiet during the workshop, and Wendy wasn't so sure if she'd be suitable for the programme, as she had a number of recent family issues. All we knew was that the title of her project was Setting Up a Community Cafe. What we didn't know is what she shared with us when Paul interviewed her about this.
My name's Charlotte Lambourne and I'm a solutions-focused community champion in Reading. I've got 2 projects, one's personal and one is in the community. My personal project is keeping my house tidy because I nearly lost my children to social services because of the state my house got into. And I'm using solutions focused as a way of looking at what I have done to keep the house tidy and the small steps I need to take to keep it tidy.
How's that going?
That's going really well actually. My house is not quite spotless, but definitely tidier than it used to be.
What's changed?
It's tidy. I spend time doing housework now instead of sleeping.
And the result of that?
The house is tidy. My children can have friends over. My children are allowed to live in my house now, which is obviously a major, major point for me.
And the other project?
My community project is St John and St Stephen's Community Cafe, which is based in a church in East Reading. And we are trying to develop it to become busier and the hub of the community, I suppose, where people can come and share information and ideas, learn skills, and just have a laugh and a chit-chat with friends over a cup of tea or coffee. Fair trade, of course. Recently we organised a big party for the royal wedding, which was attended by about 35 people. We followed the service by printing off the order of service from the internet and joined in with the hymns and the prayers, followed by a wedding buffet and everybody dressed up in their wedding finery.
And how's solution-focused ideas and tools helping you with these projects?
We're looking at what we have done rather than what we haven't done and learning to take it one step at a time instead of trying to achieve everything in 1 week, because that's not going to happen.
And what difference is that making for you?
I feel more positive. I can see now what we have done as a community cafe as opposed to what we haven't done. So it's making us feel a lot more positive about the whole experience.
Give people the tools, help them connect with their resources, expect something useful will happen, and they do the most surprising and impressive things. Here we have people previously labelled and defined by context who, when treated differently, responded differently. And what happened to me? Do you want to know? I'm going to tell you anyway, but you know, what happened to me. So when I was 13, just before I was going to embark on my education into the world of domesticity, my parents lost every penny they had. My dad went spectacularly broke. It was spectacular, really spectacular. As a result, there was no longer the money to send me to the exclusive fee-paying school, and instead I went to the local state school. As I'd come from such a reputable establishment, the teachers at my new school assumed that I must be clever. They allowed me to choose the subjects I wanted, which included physics, and put me in the top sets for everything. I responded by meeting their expectations in most areas. I got my O-levels, A-levels, an undergraduate degree, and here I am at the age of 22, graduating from the London School of Economics, one of the top universities in the UK, with a master's degree in industrial relations and human resource management. The rest, as they say, is history. We often talk about how much money we've saved our clients or how much we've increased their profits and efficiency. Yet it goes way beyond this. What we as coaches, educators, and leaders do and how we do it matters. It makes a difference. How many Julies and how many Charlottes have you met? How many more are out there? Which labels and which contexts can you change? Thank you.